really what our story is all about. It's about young people, often high school, college age, who gave of themselves on behalf of something greater. And ultimately, they paid the ultimate sacrifice for it. And we can say this whether it's about the Civil War, the soldiers buried in a semicircle there around the Soldiers' National Monument, or these soldiers killed in subsequent American wars. Oh, wait. As I said earlier, each one of these soldiers has a story. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of them. I realize we're going to be cutting it close for lunch, but these guys are worth it, in my view. If you go through the headstones, you find names like Paul Heller, buried along the stone wall here in the back, joined the United States Marine Corps in 1941, right after Pearl Harbor, at age 15. Lied about his age. He was a big kid. And he was killed on Guadalcanal less than a year later, in 1942. And he's the youngest soldier buried here, and as far as I can tell, he's the youngest American killed in combat in the Second World War. He's buried here at Gettysburg. There are other soldiers, like Francis Yohannan, who served as the inspiration for the character Yossarian and Joseph Heller's classic novel, Catch-22. So he has a literary legacy tied to his name. George Stembrowski, located right here in this front row, killed December 7th, 1941, at Pearl Harbor. Unfortunately and ironically, buried right behind the Japanese maple tree. Just a row or so behind him are Frank and Edward Matterwitz. They're the only brothers buried in this national cemetery, both killed in the summer of 1944. Frank was with the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, Band of Brothers, unit showing the famous mini-series. Killed just a short time after the D-Day drop. His brother was a crew member in a B-24 bomber, a bomber that was ferociously named Winnie the Pooh. And he was killed not too long after over the skies of Europe. And just as we can reflect during the Civil War, we also need to take into account the cost that this has on families as well. We have not only soldiers who gave up their lives, they gave up lives that they would have otherwise spent with their families and started with families. And as a result of their loss, we've been deprived of any books they have written or inventions they may have created or artwork that they may have painted. Or, the list goes on and on and on. And a lot of these stories resound with me personally, but one stands out above all else, and it's the story of Lieutenant Ralph Staley, buried right over here. This is my guy right here. I found out about this gentleman, this young lieutenant, because he and I were born in the same hometown, Altoona, Pennsylvania. That's where I live in peace today. And Ralph had a pretty rough life. He was the only child. He lost his dad in 1936 at the height of the Depression. He had to take work in order to help to support his mother, who he was obviously very close with subsequently. Entered Altoona High School, was involved in numerous clubs and organizations and activities, was on the yearbook committee, was on the student government committee, and in 1940, I believe, he graduates from high school at the age of 16. He's a really, really smart kid. And he's lucky enough to get a scholarship to none other than Gettysburg College, where He is involved in many other extracurriculars. He's in the Student History Society. He's on the yearbook staff. He's involved in student government there as well. He joins ROTC, and at the beginning of 1944, January of 1944, Gettysburg College, they were kind of condensing their classes because there was so much turnover. They wanted to get their commissioned officers out into the field so they could send them overseas. And that is exactly what happens to him in the summer of 1944. As we can see from his headstone, he was a second lieutenant in the 30th Infantry Division. His division arrives in Normandy several weeks after Operation Overlord has commenced. And as is the case with most other GIs fighting in that neck of France, he becomes bogged down in hedgerow country. It's, they're really just slogging, sometimes only moving yards a day. And in August of 1944, the Germans launch a counteroffensive to try to drive the Allies back to the sea. One last roll of the dice in trying to salvage victory from defeat in Normandy. And it is during that counteroffensive that Lieutenant Ralph Staley loses his life at age 22. Really smart guy, had his whole life ahead of him. His last letter home was dated August 18th, 1944, just a few days before he's killed in action. Florence, his mother, has her birthday on August 24th, 1944. And in the mail, she receives a bouquet of flowers from her son, who, in the meantime, has since been killed. Sorry. But that's his final act. And it's a true testament to his dedication, his commitment to family, and along those lines. But to go back to our broader point here, we've been keeping in mind this idea of the unfinished work, and